Yo, hey everybody, it's Sunday. And on Sundays, we review custom cards submitted by you guys. So really quickly, every week I'm going to do a custom card challenge. Now, to submit, all you have to do is jump in the Berryverse Discord. I got the link in the description below. You create a card using the link right there. It's easy, free tool. And then you post only one submission in the weekly challenge channel in the Discord. Please just stick it with one submission. We got an overwhelming amount of support and submissions. It was honestly, I loved it. I love the creativity. I love seeing everybody contributing, but it was a bit much to go through. So basically, I have a channel where you can post a bunch of your custom cards, and then I have one for the submission for the challenge. So just save your best one for the challenge. So this week's challenge included the mechanic draw. It had to have some affiliation with draw. Next week's challenge needs to include the no ability keyword. In my opinion, there's not enough cards in Marvel Snap with the no ability keyword or benefiting or not benefiting those cards. So I'm curious to see what you guys come up with. I also want to clarify that doesn't just mean you can make a card and it doesn't have an ability. Like find a way to put in the keyword no ability in the card's text. That's what's key. And lastly, before we get into this week's winners, I just don't want to make you feel bad if you submit a card and then I don't see it or I don't showcase it. Trust me, I'm going to be doing this every week and I'm going to try my best to diversify the winners, but I am still going to pick the ones that I like best. So there's a balance there that I need to find, but just keep submitting and I'm sure I'll eventually showcase your card. So let's get into this week's custom cards. All right, I'm starting it off with a bit of an honorable mention because I have used Syrowatts' cards before, but I really like this one, so I wanted to put it in. So we're actually getting a little bit more than 5. Usually I look to review 5 cards. This time I have 6 from you guys and 1 of my own, so we got 7 to cover here. So Syrowatts put in Wonderman. 6 cost, 0 power. This card's power matches the total number of cards drawn, opening hand not included. How cool is this? So I was thinking like, okay, what could the maximum amount of power be and the minimum power? Well, you have 3 cards in your opening hand on each side and you bring 12 cards to the table. So that leaves 9 remaining in the deck for each player. So that means if all 18 of those cards are drawn, max power that Wonderman can be is 18 power, which is interesting because you have like the Infinite where if you pass on turn 5, then he is 20 power. Wonderman has the potential to get 18 power. And I think it's not too hard to actually get people to draw cards, you and your opponent. You're in a normal game of Marvel Snap, you're only going to end up with 3 cards left in your deck. That's just drawing on turns 1 through 6, right? So at the minimum, he'd be 12 power if you didn't draw any extra cards and your opponent didn't draw any extra cards. But there's ways that we can get around. So there's Maximus. You automatically just get your opponent to draw 2 cards. They can't do anything about it. Boom, the cards are in their hand. Unless they have too full of a hand size, then maybe not. But bam, you give them 2 cards and now you just buffed your Wonderman essentially 2 power. Or Crystal. All of a sudden, Crystal has a lot of value. You're going to hear me talk about Crystal a lot in this video, which is interesting because she's a really bad card. But basically, if you put your hand back into the deck and then draw 3 cards, that triggers it. And now his max amount of power is not just 18 in a standard game of Marvel Snap. Now it could be up in the 20 range. So Crystal makes it really interesting. And then the cards like Mantis and Cable that can steal cards from your opponent's deck, those are easy triggers to make sure that, one, your opponent's thinning out their deck, and you draw cards for Wonderman. So I'm giving Wonderman 3 stars. I think his power potential is actually pretty insane. I mean, at minimum, you're a Hulk, and then at max, you're 18. So it's really good, but it has the same problem as a Hulk in that you're just playing it at one location, and you have to win the game beforehand. And right now, if you're focusing on making yourself draw and your opponent draw, there's not that many cards that are going to like give you the win at a location. Maybe Maximus does. Crystal, great for the draw, but then might be awkward if you have Wonderman in hand already and then you throw him back to the deck and you don't find a way to draw him later on. So I just feel like maybe it gets a little bit clunky. Lots of power at one location, but might make it tough to win another. All right, and now we have Jean Grey, Kai's submission. Thank you, Kai, for this really creative submission. And also, I know you went the extra mile making it frame break with the green border. Talk about catching my eye. This was fantastic submission art and everything. Loved it. So Jean Grey is a 2-cost 3 power. And the other reason, besides just the awesome art that I wanted to showcase this card, is because it's using tribes. So tribes in like Hearthstone, for instance, you'd have beasts and mechs and stuff like that. You don't have that in Marvel Snap. And I get this question a lot. Should this be added to the game? Should there be like X-Men buffs or Avenger buffs or all those sorts of things? And while I kind of want it to, and I'm not sure if it should be, it's really interesting to speculate on some cards that would work if that were the case. So in this instance, she's an on reveal draw an X-Men card, give it +3 power, which is busted. Let's be real. You basically, you can tutor out a card. So the idea that I think for this is basically I just run 1 X-Men card in my deck, maybe 2. But let's just say a focus on a couple cards. I'm not going to shove a bunch of X-Men cards for the guaranteed draw. That might be good. But right now what I'm thinking is you just leave 1 in there and then you're guaranteed to get +3 power. So what are some fire cards to get with that? Well, Nightcrawler is not a bad idea because now you have a 5 power. You can move them to a location of your choosing. So that's decent, but maybe not too crazy. But Professor X? All of a sudden you got a 6 power Professor X to lock down the location. One of the problems with X is that if your opponent plays too much power there, the minute you drop him, you instantly lose the game. And it's just a feels bad moment. A little bit more power, and all of a sudden you're that much more confident playing him. So that'd be insane. Another one is APOC. Let's say I'm running a discard deck and I don't have any other X-Men characters except for Jean Grey and APOC. Guaranteed to draw APOC. And then my Lady Sif and all my discard things are going to start popping off on APOC. One of his weaknesses is you don't draw him in time to actually discard him and then get his power total up. So this is kind of like a tutor out for APOC, which I think would be fire. So yeah, this card is probably too strong. That's why I'm giving it 5 stars. And honestly, she could probably be 0 power and still good enough. But really creative idea to make tribes work in Marvel Snap. I love seeing this kind of thing. And I'm starting to lean more towards liking these kind of cards and wanting to see them in Marvel Snap, but time will tell. All right, next we have Fang's Wiccan? I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize. I didn't look it up either. Whatever, you can tell me in the comments, but he's a 4-cost 1 power. On reveal, look at your opponent's hand, choose a card to exchange with your next draw. Now, the text that the text that Fang had on it originally, I didn't find it that clear. I hope I'm translating it accordingly. So I apologize if I changed the essence of the card, Fang. But I think this makes sense to me. I think it's still very strong. And it's using the draw keyword, right? That's what we need to do for this challenge. So very fascinating. On reveal, you're going to take a card. Essentially, you get to pluck that card that your opponent really wants to play on turn 5 and 6. So I'm thinking about like those Onslaughts, those Odins, just an absolute combo breaker. Put it into your deck, which doesn't really matter, for your next draw, and that doesn't really matter either. You could run a bunch of, poor cards maybe, and then you just get rid of them. So what I was thinking was with Wong, if you Wong on 4 and then use this on 5, you'll get 2 cards from their hand before turn 6 that you can put in your deck and give them whatever else you got. That's a pretty good swing. And the other way I was thinking is if you put a bunch of junk into their hand so that it's easier to pick out the cards that they do want to play, like Rocks or Black Widow's Widow Bite. Oh, and then I didn't even mention that you get to see your opponent's hand. Like, knowledge is so important, and you get to just see what they have, and then you can plan accordingly. Or you could just straight up retreat because you see all the crazy combos that they have available and your hand isn't looking too good, and it's an easy save my cubes and get out of here situation. But with all that said, I'm giving him 2 stars, and maybe honestly that's a little bit too low, but the reason being is that he's just 1 power. And you're playing him really late, you're spending your 4th turn to do this, and you're probably wanting to play decent cards in your deck to try and win out the game, have enough power to win. So when you do the swap, it might not be worthwhile. It depends on what they have in their hand. The ideal situation that everyone's mind will go to is Onslaught, Patriot, like those kind of crazy combo things. But if they just have decent cards in their hand that they were playing for power output, might not affect them that much. And you're probably giving them something decent in return. And that's what you spent your turn 4 on. So I see a lot of pros with this card, and I see a lot of maybe whiffs. So I felt like I had to give it a middling range on the rating scale, but it's a super creative idea. It has a lot of mechanics in it without being too wordy. So great job, Fang. And then we got my card, Cul Borsen. Ongoing, your opponent draws 1 extra card per turn. Not probably great, but oh well. If their deck is empty, plus 10 power. He's a 4-cost 0 power. So in an ideal situation, he becomes a 4/10. And I think this condition is actually pretty easy to pull off because like I was saying earlier, you're only going to have 3 cards in your deck at the end of the game. If I'm making you draw 2 extra, turn 5 and then turn 6, then you only have 1 extra card in the deck. So if I Yondu it, if I cable it, it's gone. That deck is empty. So as a result, I get a 4-cost 10 power card, which is fantastic and probably too powerful. There's a lot of other synergies here too. Ronin, because I can put cards into your hand, make sure that you draw with like Maximus and things. Then all of a sudden you have a lot of cards. I play Ronin, good value, right after Cul Borsen as well. But then also there's things like Mr. Negative, because this is a 0 power thing. If you swapped it around, that would be 14 power for 0. Broken. And then even Onslaught, you can double the power of this. So then you get plus 20 power. That's probably nuts. So this is probably a 5-cost card, and I probably went a little bit too far, but I thought it was really cool thematically. Visually, he would turn into the serpent. So when the activation happened from the ongoing effect, there would be a visual cue, which I thought would look really cool. From my brief understanding of the lore, he's Odin's brother who is trapped away, and then when he finally got released from some kind of prison he was in, he became the serpent because he was corrupted with power. So that's where I was thinking the evolution here would come from. Yeah, I'm curious to know what you guys think. I'm pretty sure this is a little bit too bonkers, a little bit too broken, but it would be a cool card in Marvel Snap, right? Like motivation to get your opponents to draw cards, which is essentially giving them more tools and letting them see if they have an empty deck, they have seen all of the cards that they brought to the table. They're able to pull off the combos that they brought. So maybe this isn't enough. Right? And then also we have to understand that this is extremely weak to Shang-Chi, Enchantress because it's an ongoing effect, Rogue as well. So there's a lot of counters. And then it could be a completely dead card if Subterranea pops up and rocks in your deck or anything like that. If any which way there's cards in your opponent's deck, it's going to be that much harder. And then you have a 4-cost 0 power. That's how I kind of thought he'd be balanced a little bit. Next up, we have Yohoho's Legion. I love saying your name. It's so good. Legion is a 6-cost, 8 power. Draw 2 cards. This card gains both their abilities. That could be insane. The number one thing I was thinking about with this card is if you are able to ramp it out early, right? You get it out on 5. Because that's not only just 2 draws, you get 2 cards, but you also get their abilities. Imagine that was Iron Man and Black Panther. Black Panther's going to trigger. It's going to double the power of this card. He's going to be 16, and then Iron Man's going to double it for that location. That's 32 at a location. That's nuts. Honestly, I'm thinking already while I'm saying this that this could be a higher star rating. The reason I didn't give it such a high star rating is because I thought like if you play it on 6, you don't get the cards that you want. So you're going to be drawing cards all the time. By turn 6, you only have 3 left in there. If they're not very good ongoing abilities or any kind of abilities on reveal, anything like that, then he's a bit of a dead card, right? You don't really want that. But you're probably building your deck with the thought of every single one of these cards needs to have a good ability. So that when it does trigger, I'm guaranteed success. So yeah, this would probably be pretty nuts. Even another one I was thinking of is Thor. Maybe you play Thor, Mjolnir gets into the deck, and then you end up drawing Mjolnir, and that triggers for Thor, another way to get him out. But this is a really creative idea. I love the idea of gaining other cards' abilities. That's really fascinating, and through the draw mechanic is really cool. Maybe if I was to balance this card, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it would just be 1, but maybe that's not fun enough. I like the amalgamate. I like how it mixes with 2 other abilities and the crazy combinations that you could get from that. Maybe it just straight up shouldn't have 8 power. Maybe it's got to be like 2 power. And even though I put it as 3, I'm thinking it's a 5 now. Now that I plan it out all out in my head. But anyways, thank you, Yohoho, for the submission. This was a great card. Then we have Unimations, Loxias Crown. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know this character. I'm not familiar with it. But a really interesting power level here. I love seeing this when there's something that exceeds the energy threshold and has a lot of power. I'm like, okay, well, what is the effect? What are we getting at here? And this one is each time you draw a card, this costs one less. Now, the thing I wasn't too sure about, that's why I have a 1-star and a 5-star, because it really varies on this clarification. Does this card need to be in your hand to receive the discount? That's what I wasn't too sure about. Because if it does need to be in the hand to receive the discount, I think that's more logically sound from a balance standpoint, but it won't be that good. If you draw it on turn 5, you're only going to draw 1 card, and then you can never play this. The only way you'd be able to play it is if it starts in the opening hand. But then you do get a 6-drop that's 15 power, and maybe that's okay. Or you find other ways to draw cards while it's in hand and you discount it further. I think that's kind of fair. It's kind of like death. A lot of the times with death, you get, like, if you don't draw a wave or something like that, you end up playing her for maybe 5. If this gets to about 5, like, that's a lot of power, right? And I think that would be balanced. So I think it needs to trigger while it's in hand, but it very well could mean each time you drew a card this game, this costs 1 less, which is just crazy, because if we do the math real quick, including our opening hand, that is going to be a 3-cost 15 power card, which is just a huge swing on turn 6. That's just like probably way too much. So let me know, Unimations, if that's the design that you're going with. Either which way, it's really interesting. The mechanic on its own right is really cool. Anyone familiar with Hearthstone will remember the giants, right? You had like the lava giant that got discounted for every health that you lost. And then there was the mountain giant that would buff for every card in your hand, or discounted rather for every card in your hand. This kind of plays into that, and I really like that for Marvel Snap. We already have death, but I could definitely see a version of death in other archetypes like draw. I feel like there should be more of those cards in Snap because they're really interesting to build around, but maybe a little bit too broken. They have to be balanced very delicately. And I think the original version I was mentioning, where this has to be in hand, I think that is a fair balance and not too broken. Also excellent in things like Lockjaw decks and Jubilee decks. So I think the original version that I was talking about would be really good. Some other synergies here too are like Crystal, right? We can throw the cards in, draw more cards, discount this further. Adam Warlock gets some draw, and then Devil Dino probably because you're going to have a big hand drawing all those cards. Other synergies are like Wave, just like there's Death Wave, there could be like Wave Crown or something like that, or Wave Draw. That would be pretty cool. So anyways, really cool submission. Thank you so much for Unimations for sending this. Let's get to the next one. All right, last but certainly not least, I adore this card. There's so much to talk about here. NohWonGames submitted Mimir. 1 cost, 2 power, but that doesn't matter at all because the ability is while this is in your hand, you can see your next draw. Wow, I love this. This is super cool because it doesn't mean you have to ever play this card. There's no card in Marvel Snap right now where you get a continuous benefit for not playing it. Pretty much everything you have to play, ongoing effects, on reveal effects, you just have to get those cards out. Whereas this, if it just sits in your hand, you're good. But if it accidentally gets played by something, they're going to pull cards from your hand, and if they pull this, then you're not going to get the effect anymore. So it's actually something that you want to keep in your hand. Also, if they like Moon Knight you and discard this or something, there's a lot of ways that you could lose this card from your hand and it would be really disappointing. Whereas if you just keep it there, you just tuck it away, you're always going to know what you draw next, which is just another depth to strategizing your gameplay. And I don't think that's too broken either. It's very helpful. It'll let you know what's coming next and what you should plan for, but it's not going to give you a huge power swing to beat your opponent. It's not going to give you that much of an edge over them. It's not like you know what they're going to play still. It's just giving you a better idea of how things are going to go, which in terms of gaining and losing cubes is fantastic, because if you know what you're going to draw and it's not looking good, it's not that turn 6 card that you desperately need to win the game, you get out on turn 5. It's very reminiscent of the Watcher, Watu, right? Except the Watcher loses value after turn 3, whereas this continues to have value basically up unless you draw it on turn 6, then it's dead card. But even if you just drew it on turn 5, knowing your turn 6 draw is valuable. So when I was thinking of synergies, I was thinking like, okay, rescue, you're going to play rescue. Maybe I should see what my next card is before I play rescue so I know what to play there next. Also, Infinite. If you haven't drawn Infinite yet and it's turn 5, maybe you should pass because he's on the top of your deck and you know what you're going to draw. So I just absolutely love this design. I think it opens up so many different possibilities. It's not too broken, but it's still good and can find a place in the meta. It's very simple. I think it could have a really cool effect. I love that it's just a head on a post. I think that's really funny too. I could see like it like glowing green or something, then your deck glowing green and showing you the card, something like that. Super unique, super cool, easy to understand. It was a great submission, NohWonGames. So thank you. But that's going to do it. That is this week's custom cards review. Thank you to everyone who submitted. And if you submitted a card and I didn't showcase it here, don't get too disappointed. Honestly, there were so many good submissions. If I had more time and I wouldn't go crazy putting all these cards and doing an hour-long video, maybe I would. Honestly, I'm thinking about maybe doing a live stream where I can go through all these cards and still do these videos for the few that really stand out, but still touch on everyone's submissions. That might come soon. We'll see. But right now we're sticking with the weekly videos, and you can expect part number 4 coming out next Sunday, the No Ability Challenge. So get your submissions ready, jump in the Berryverse Discord, subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time.